Most know Korriban as the quintessential planet of the Sith. Its red-hot sands and scores of tombs almost scream out the powers of the dark side. However, while Korriban was indeed the birthplace of the Sith race and their order, it was never actually the capital of the old Sith Empire. That honor belongs to the unforgivingly frigid world known as Ziost. Korriban itself had been simply a tomb world, a burial place for the ancient Sith kings and the Dark Lords who would come after. Later, it would be the site of various Sith academies, but it was Ziost that was the throne world. Famous Dark Lords like Ajunta Pal, Marka Ragnos, and Naga Sadow all called this place home whenever they kicked up their feet to rule the Empire. And yet, Ziost is one of the more forgotten about, the overshadowed planet in the Sith's history. So join us today as we correct this in our own holocron, and give Ziost the honor that has long since been denied. Welcome, my friends, to the archives, and let us begin. As always, we'll begin with the historiography and the geography of the planet. Ziost was the primary planet of the Ziost system. Like many other star systems, this one planet held so much importance that it was named after its own system, since it was the only planet in the system that anyone really cared about. Ziost was located on the northern side of the Stygian caldera. For those who don't know, the Stygian caldera was a massive nebula which enclosed Sith space. Within this enclosed section were the ancient Sith worlds such as Korriban, Drome and Kos, and the rest of them. The nebula acted as a hyperspace breakwater to protect the Empire from attack, and it was extremely difficult to navigate unless you had the Force or knew the Dragon Trail hyperlane, which was a secret hyperlane that ran directly to the deep core. Interestingly, the icy Ziost was located on the northernmost side of the caldera, far opposite to the desert-like Korriban, which had been located in the southernmost region. So the throne world and the tomb world physically bookended the Empire, which I think is a neat detail. Ziost was orbited by 2 moons and was considered one of the 5 sacred Sith planets right alongside Kar Delba, Relig, Krayus II, and Korriban. But now on to history. The surface of Ziost long ago was originally covered with a thick forest and boasted a warm climate, but in the year 27,700 BBY, Ziost began drifting away from its sun and had a devastating ice age, one which destroyed most of the planet's flora and most evidence of native civilization. What resulted would be what Ziost remained for the rest of its existence, an arid tundra filled with rocky terrain, ice-encrusted mountains and glaciers, and at least one salty ocean. Not many kinds of fauna lived on Ziost besides predators like the green flying monstrosities which resembled miniature dragons. These reptavians plagued the sky of Ziost, constantly searching for a meal that may or may never come. They feasted on the resilient, but the dark side mutated insects such as the Sith pincer bugs. These bugs had a potent corrosive venom which the ancient Sith used to administer to a unique forehead marking on whoever became a Dark Lord in a sacred ritual. And speaking of the Sith, let's talk about the culture of Ziost. The very first time Ziost was crowned as the throne world of the Empire was when King Adis conquered it. This was during the time of the Great Rakatan invasion of Sith space. As the well-known story goes, the Infinite Empire had found the Sith on their world of Korriban. Despite being a primitive people that had just barely discovered interstellar flight, they were terrifyingly powerful, born as warriors, and with the touch of the dark side. Led by the seemingly invincible King Adis, they were a true force. The Rakatan leaders decided to try a different approach with the people that they had with others, and so they presented themselves as off-world friends at first, and offered the great Sith King gifts in the form of holocron technology. King Adis accepted their offerings, but saw through their lie. After making his own holocron, he led the Sith people into attack against the Overlords. The Battle of Korriban was long and bloody, but the Sith people overcame the more advanced species, chased them off of their homeworld. King Adis captured several of the Rakatan starships as well that failed to escape in time, and used them to literally chase the others across the caldera, fighting the Rakata against 7 different worlds and discovering them in the process. King Adis himself slew countless thousands of Rakatan soldiers, and had that part of the Infinite Empire limped away in desperation, forever knowing who they had lost to. A Sith god. The final battle happened on the world of Ziost, where Adis would vanquish them from Sith space forever, but would later die to his many injuries. Although the legend of the Sith Ari was created for Adis, he was still dead, and without his unifying force holding the Empire together, the Sith plunged into a civil war. They tore themselves apart after a series of bloody conflicts that resulted in the tribes becoming scattered across space. The large populace of remaining Sith repurposed the leftover Rakatan ships, achieving hyperspace travel and more advancements. The people would then travel to Ziost en masse and populate the world, turning it into a metropolis. At this point in time, Ziost was still a forested world with a pleasant climate, and so the Sith Kasai priests ordered the construction of a massive citadel fortress, a symbol to the Sith's supremacy. They wanted this temple placed atop a large cliff to overlook their new world, and the priests took with them knowledge. They brought with them many of the religious writing systems, powerful tomes which they kept in this single citadel. The Sith Lords left on Korriban were largely considered religious fanatics that desired to remain with the bones of the previous kings. Korriban was designated as a tomb world, and Ziost was set apart as the Sith capital. However, the Ice Age would strike, wiping out all who had once lived on Ziost, severing them from the rest of the Sith Empire, in a time of great tragedy and separation. In fact, Ziost wouldn't be rediscovered until sometime after 6900 BBY by the Sith Ajunta Pal and his Dark Jedi. After many years of learning the ways of the Sith people, undermining their society, and setting themselves up as kings and rulers, the Dark Jedi finally achieved hyperspace travel, and had mapped out the looping hyperlane that connected most of the Stygian caldera. It was then that they discovered the last 5 sacred Sith worlds, and one of them was Ziost. At that time, they reassumed Ziost as the capital world and set up various grand palaces for themselves, claiming their heritage. It was here when these once Dark Jedi dubbed themselves the Gen Jedi, taking the name from the Sith tongue. Ajunta Pal established the ancient citadel as the meeting place where all of them would congregate and convene when necessary. And from that point forward, both the citadel and Ziost itself became a neutral ground for all Sith Lords to meet and speak peacefully. A sacred covenant written by the founder of the Sith Order himself, which all Lords must honor. In the years that followed, the Gen Jedi would be studiously at work. Sor's Sin in particular found a fascination with the creation of Sith war beasts. It was here that Sin found out that the ancient Sith way of dark alchemy was from a holocron by the name of King Nakuru. The other Gen Jedi perfected the arts of sorcery in the meantime, as well as focusing on lightsaber combat and understandings of the dark side using the vast amounts of knowledge they had found from the Sith people. It would also be on Ziost where the Sith Code was authored, pointing out the failings of the Jedi Code. Peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. But it wasn't long after this that the 12 became jealous of one another and began to fight each other for their knowledge. Ironically, although Ziost was meant to be a neutral meeting place, many of the 12 would fall here during battle, one that took place in one of the many palaces. Their fighting caused the building to fall upon them and destroy and kill many of the 12. Their leader and emperor Ajunta Pal was even slain by who we believe was Tulak Hord. Tulak Hord, who would reign on Ziost for many more centuries to come, surviving the brutal onslaught of the other original Dark Jedi. Later, Marka Ragnos would be the Dark Lord of the Sith Empire, and it was on Ziost where he would meet the young Tenebrae. Tenebrae asked for ownership of his own world of Nathema, which had already been mostly taken over and conquered. Impressed with the boy's ambition, Marka Ragnos granted him ownership of the planet and dubbed him Darth Vitiate. However, Marka Ragnos denied the boy's request to become his apprentice. Ragnos sensed danger from that course of action, and after Ragnos' death, there were 2 candidates to become the Lord of the Sith. Tenebrates that were not Vitiate, Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh. Naga Sadow was worried that the great golden age of the Sith that was brought upon them by Ragnos would stagnate and fail if they didn't leverage their advantage, expand into the Republic immediately. Ludo Kresh, on the other hand, was more conservative and thought that it better for the Sith to stay where they were, preserve what they built. The 2 of them actually entered a fierce duel on Korriban during the funeral procession of Marka Ragnos, but they were interrupted by his spirit, a spirit who warned about the coming destruction of the Empire if they did not care for it properly. Right in that moment, they were caught up in an unexpected sight. A starship of unknown origin descending into the Valley of the Dark Lords. When the ship landed, 2 humans disembarked, proclaimed themselves emissaries from the Galactic Republic and intended that they were trying to set up a trade relationship with the Sith. In truth, the pair were siblings Gav and Jory Deragon, fugitives who had stumbled upon Korriban after making a blind hyperspace jump. Their story, not believable, they were promptly seized as spies by the Sith. Kresh wanted to kill them immediately, but Naga Sadow thought that the Deragons could be the key to the new Sith conquest, and Sadow ordered them to be imprisoned on Ziost. For Sadow, the Republic was a vast new field to conquer, but it could also be a unifying force for an increasingly split empire, a distraction from political weakness on the home front. With the Deragons in chains, Naga Sadow met with the rest of the Sith Council, ironically, on Ziost's own citadel. While several of the members agreed with Kresh that the visitors should be put to death, Naga Sadow made an impassioned plea to keep them alive, stating that their knowledge of the rest of the galaxy could lead to the greater Sith domination and control. And while his words were considered and debated, the council decided to execute the twins. Nevertheless though, Sadow had a plan. As Naga watched from his secret fortress of Karshian, a Sith soldier loyal to him snuck into the Deragon ship and stole a pair of Republic blasters. Once the weapons were in hand, Sadow quickly raided Ziost with a small strike team. The twins found themselves greeted by Naga Sadow, who had freed them and killed all witnesses using some of the Republic blasters. Naga Sadow even killed his old teacher and friend, Seamus. Naga Sadow then left the weapon behind at the scene and left the Deragons behind at a secret citadel. He then promptly returned to Ziost to see his strike team and to see if they too had been successful. Naga Sadow arrived to see that everything had gone according to plan. The Sith Council was in a panic, and the Republic was now to blame. Feigning shock at the deaths of all of these Sith, Sadow loudly proclaimed that it was time for them to strike back at the Republic, and officially announced his intentions to seize the title of the Dark Lord. To Ludo Kresh's horror, several members of the Sith Council backed his claim, and Kresh left in a huff with his supporters, stating that he would become the true Dark Lord. Naga Sadow would then undergo the ritual of the pincer bug, searing a mark on his forehead that firmly placed him as the new and sole Dark Lord of the Sith, the Emperor of a vast golden empire, but one that was in quick decay. Immediately, Naga Sadow and Kresh went to war, but Sadow was more cunning, ruthless, and genius than Kresh could ever hope to be, forcing him into one naval battle, and swiftly defeated him. After this, Naga Sadow proclaimed that Gav Deragon would be his apprentice, teaching him the ways of Sith magic. Naga sensed that there was promise within the young failed Jedi, and Jory Deragon was given her ship back and turned loose to return to the Republic, believing that she was now loyal to the Sith. But Naga Sadow had placed a tracker on her ship so that he could follow her through hyperspace, hoping that this would allow him to strike directly at the heart of the Republic. He then gathered his forces and initiated what is known as the Great Hyperspace War. But since we're not focusing on the events of the war, but rather Ziost, we'll skip those events as we've covered them in holocrons before. But just know that it goes very bad for our prospective Sith Master. After the war concluded and Naga Sadow failed, Ziost was stripped of all of its treasure, doing the worst that the Republic and the Jedi could. They also took the artifacts and knowledge. The Jedi pillaged tombs, taking the rest of the world's, all of its knowledge with it, and the Sith's hatred for them grew even greater. Ziost was then largely forgotten about by the galaxy, until it was temporarily made a fortress of war during the Mandalorian Wars, though their hold on the planet was broken by Revan. Later, Darth Revan would return to Ziost to study it for information, but even Revan couldn't find anything significant. The Jedi had picked over it too thoroughly. The importance of Ziost would resurface during the Great Galactic War, when Vitiate returned with a reconstituted empire. Although at this point, Drome and Kos had been replaced as the capital of the Sith Empire, the tundra world of Ziost was still an important trade and a political hub. In fact, so much trade happened on Ziost that it was dubbed the Gateway to the Empire. This was due to the metropolitan city of New Adasta. This had become a major commercial, political, and population center for the new Sith Empire. New Adasta was constructed atop a rocky crag in the tundra of Ziost, and the city's central district was in fact located in the cave underneath that crag. The centerpiece of the city was the People's Tower, a large skyscraper similar in design to the Imperial Citadel. This Sith city became one of the most significant economic centers in the entire Empire, which was why the Sith defended it so fiercely. The Republic had laid siege to Ziost before, but the Sith managed to throw them off after a series of strenuous conflicts. In the year 3636 BBY though, following the defeat of Darth Revan by the combined Republic and the Imperial forces of Yavin 4, Vitiate would then be a plague, a returned plague, as he attacked Ziost in an attempt to regain control of the Empire that he had once ruled. Vitiate took the minds and legions of the Imperial forces of the planet, used them to massacre a large portion of the planet's citizens, only to fuel his power. Vitiate would then conduct a similar ritual to the one that he had done on Nathema, using a force drain to absorb all force energy on Ziost. This left the world a dead, a colorless frozen husk, a wasteland. However, Ziost would not remain this way forever. It was too powerful. Our current theory is that Vitiate may have used a different ritual, or his spirit form at the time was not strong enough to complete the entire ritual as he had on Nathema. But after this conflict, the world of Ziost was again forgotten for a time, passing again into legend. Later, in 2000 BBY, the actions of Darth Ruin introduced a new expansion for the Sith. This caused Ziost to be rediscovered yet again, but by this point apparently, Ziost was said to have regained its former strength in the Force, and color was returning to the world. No life existed there yet, but it was no longer a void in the Force. This means Vitiate's ritual was either incomplete or different from Nathema. But in the year 1960 BBY, the Amulet of Kalara was constructed on Ziost. This was an evil amulet which radiated a malicious glee through the Force to anyone who sensed it. Allegedly, anyone who wore the amulet could become invisible in the Force. But between the year 1004 and 1000 BBY, Ziost would fall under the control of Lord Khan's Brotherhood of Darkness, while the new Sith Wars were coming to their conclusion. However, the planet's existence was forgotten again when the Brotherhood went extinct from the actions of Darth Bane and the Battle of Ruusan. The knowledge of Ziost's location was known only to the Jedi Order and to the Sith that belonged in the lineage of the Rule of Two. However, no Jedi ever went to Ziost because they still believed it to be devoid of the Force. Cursed, it is known that Sidious would visit the world at one point, taking with him an altar used in ancient Sith rituals, taking the altar and placing it within his private collection of artifacts. At the end of the Clone Wars, Sidious ensured that all records of Ziost were eliminated, deleted from star charts and public databases. It wouldn't be for another 16 years until General Rom Koda used it as a temporary hideout, while ironically running from the Empire. At this point, Ziost had completely regained its natural dark strength in the Force, and miraculously was healing from the damage done to it over many years, thousands of them. Even some plants were beginning to grow on the world again. Starkiller would later visit while following Rom Koda's trail, and the next person to find Ziost was Lady Lumaya, a secret apprentice of Vader, who actually constructed her infamous light whip using technology that she found on Ziost. This made her light whip truly a Sith weapon forged from an ancient history. By the year 40 ABY, the damage done to the planet seemed to have almost completely been reversed. Ziost was once again a blue-green world, purified from even the dark side. The land masses at the equator were almost entirely green, save for a large polar ice cap. Its surface was covered with forest and tundras again, now full of force energy, but still icy cold to its core. But do not be deceived by Ziost. Despite the planet being lush, it still radiated with evil. Luke Skywalker's son Ben Skywalker would come to Ziost during his quest to track down the Amulet of Kalara. He would eventually crash on the world, find himself stranded with a girl from the Jedi Academy who had accompanied him. Along their journey towards finding the amulet and a way off Ziost, Ben Skywalker would be tormented by the dark side, voices robbing him of sleep, forcing nightmares into his mind, quickly driving him towards insanity. Ziost wanted the mind of a Skywalker. These Sith hub worlds were notoriously malicious to all Jedi visitors, attempting to drive them towards the dark side, or if they would not embrace that, then madness. Ben's group was starving as they had run out of food, and the Dark Whispers were telling him to eat his friends for their strength. And Ben Skywalker considered it for a second, although he shook off the thoughts. Legends can get weird, guys. Pressing forward and seeking through the Force for strength. Eventually, Ben Skywalker and the rest of the group managed to escape Ziost without succumbing to any dark fate. The last we hear of the world is in the year 137 ABY, after the Battle of Yavin. Here, the planet once again came under the control of the Sith, but this time a new version. A group calling themselves the One Sith, led by Darth Krayt. And so, my friends, that was the complete history of the Sith capital of Ziost. Korriban may have been the birthplace of the Sith, but Ziost was where they learned to walk. It was where the code was written. This is where their society and even the order took off. The neutrality of Ziost was established and then broken time and time again. The planet itself was even betrayed and devastated by one of its own in Vitiate. And yet, somehow Ziost managed to climb its way back from extinction, even return to its former glory. It's almost as if the planet has its own patient and methodical will. But anyway, guys, what do you think of Ziost? Had you known much about it before our video? And would you like us to take an in-depth look at other worlds in Star Wars, Sith or otherwise? If you enjoyed this video and haven't yet, consider subscribing and joining our order. But even just for your view, we thank you here at the Archives. And as always, may the Force be with you.